We are talking LA Kings offseason and more with Kings broadcaster and host Josh Schaefer on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show that wraps up the night in the NHL. During the offseason, we're actually doing interviews with all 32 hosts around the Locked On Network to get you updated on what's going on with their teams as we head into next season. Also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, we're happy to be joined by LA Kings broadcaster and host Josh Schaefer, who just wrapped up his first season with the LA Kings, but he's been with the organization for a while. Last time we had him on was a couple of years ago when he was the play-by-play man for the Ontario Reign. Josh, great to have you back on. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Eddie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, last time we had you on, like I said, you were doing stuff for the Ontario Reign, but you just wrapped up your first year with the LA Kings. Certainly want to get your thoughts on the team, both this offseason and going forward. But I also wanted to kind of get to learn a little bit more about you. We didn't do that the last time we chatted for whatever reason. That's on the host. But I just wanted to get some of your background. Where are you from? I know where you went to school, but I'll let you talk about that. I know you're a proud alum of a very impressive broadcasting school as well. But and how did you kind of make your way to the Kings?
Yeah, it's an interesting story for me. I'm from LA. I'm from the San Fernando Valley. Went to high school out there. Grew up out there. My parents are still in the west end of the valley. We had a sports live streaming program, or we had what was very bare bones at the time. We had a high school journalism program, but we did have the capability to live stream some games with a TriCaster that worked not when we wanted it to, but didn't work when we needed it to. And we started doing JV and varsity football, baseball, basketball, men's and women's soccer, and we had a lot of fun with that. And then after that, I went to Arizona State. So went to the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, had a blast there. It was the school's first full year playing Division I hockey when I was there. That definitely played a role in me wanting to go there. Wanted to do big time college football, so got to do Pac-12 games when I was there on student radio, and of course ASU is a prestigious baseball and softball program as well, so got to do games for both of those programs on the Pac-12 network. Did ice hockey, a lot of basketball my senior year. Was the broadcasting director for the radio station, and made a lot of lifelong friendships. I met my fiance in college. We both have the same degree. So we just have so many friends who are now in this industry in a bunch of different ways. Of course, COVID was obviously a part of my story as well. I graduated right in the height of the pandemic. So that took some of our friends down a different path, who maybe thought they were going to go one way. And for me, I was really fortunate to come back home, and while just living at home, nothing going on, applying for jobs, I just kind of stumbled into an opportunity to fill in for the Reign during COVID. That led to a full-time broadcast gig with the Reign and opportunities with the Kings, and all the way to today where I'm gearing up for my second season with LA. So it's funny how it worked out. I talk to aspiring broadcasters all the time and current, college broadcasters, and they kind of ask like how I broke into it. I'm like, I can give you all the advice in the world. You don't have to take it though, because for me, I graduated during a really hard time. Like I was interviewing for positions before the pandemic shut down everything, and those positions never really amounted to anything. So because there was no job at the end of the day. So for me, I'm really fortunate. I like to think that I made connections and networked and, had a resume that could help me get to the position that I'm in now. But I also know that I'm very fortunate at the same time. So, I can give people advice, but I don't know if it worked for me. So I guess I got lucky.
Obviously unique for Arizona State to have a hockey program. Now there's no NHL team there, unfortunately, but maybe there will be at some point down the road. But I got to believe if that program doesn't exist, you're probably not the voice of the Ontario Arena now working for the LA Kings.
Yeah, probably not. I grew up in LA, so I grew up like a USC football fan. So I always saw Arizona State and, was exposed to the athletics at ASU. And, when I started to gain interest in going to school there and going to the Cronkite School, you start following more of the sports programs and stuff like that when you think you might want to go to a school. And then came the announcement that they were going to have a D1 hockey team. And that was definitely a huge selling point for me, was the opportunity to do hockey. I'd never done hockey until my freshman year. My sophomore year, I did a game with Cale Makar at UMass when UMass was like not really that good. Saw Brady Tkachuk at BU and some other really good players as well, just working at ASU. And then, of course, our goalie at ASU was Joey Decord, who's the number one for Seattle now. So it was really fun to get to go there and see this program, kind of build itself up. And their motto has always been "Be the tradition," because there was no tradition, right? They were a club program that won a national championship and then just vaulted to the D1 level and got a lot of support from a ton of different people in a ton of different places, and now has started to build itself up. In fact, my fiance and I and a friend of ours, we went to a game at Mullet this last year during the NHL break. It was the first time that I'd been back and seen the new building, and I was just stunned by what that program had turned itself into. And, I still have a pretty good relationship with the head coach, Greg Powers, and saw him at the NHL draft. 2 Sun Devils were taken in the draft this year, including Cullen Potter in the first round, which was very cool. So it's really cool to see where the program has come from and where it's gotten to today. But, when I was there, we were at Oceanside Ice Arena, which was the small, I describe it as like a refrigerator. It's like when you open your freezer, and that's what the arena looked like. And, we would hit our heads on the roof when we'd go up into the press box, and we could hear the benches chirping each other from where we broadcasted from. Our mics would pick it up half the time. But it was just really cool being involved and getting those opportunities and getting coached by our producer, Mark, who's an LA guy and did games for the Diamondbacks and all that, and getting to learn from him and meet all these people and kind of get to really feel like the voice of a team. While not really working for the team, I was just a student, but to do those games on the old Pac-12 networks and just kind of get to see the program grow was really cool. And it definitely helped me get to where I am today. I know some of those ASU tapes back then were some of the things that the Kings had and the Reign had when I was doing games, when I was filling in during COVID. It was because of those ASU tapes that I had.
I know it's been asked of me. We have a feedback show that fans chime in on. And then recently we had a question about, do you ever think that USC or UCLA can have a hockey program? And I would love to see it. I think it would be amazing for obviously hockey in Southern California. Arizona State certainly is an example of how it can get done. And I have a little bit of a connection with the head coach at Penn State. I was worked with him when he was in minor hockey. And that program obviously has come from nothing. They were in the Frozen Four this year. So it's certainly possible. You got to find the people that are going to obviously invest the money in it. You would think UCLA and UCLA have those type of people, but your thoughts on if we could ever see something like that, kind of maybe following the footsteps of Arizona State?
Yeah, my understanding is that when ASU was starting out, they kind of had the blueprint of what Penn State had done and what Quinnipiac had done, and they won a national championship recently. And they're in Connecticut. So, you've got a Northeast school there, Penn State. It seems like Penn State is a school that would have always had a hockey team, but they didn't. They're relatively recent as well. So it's interesting because at the time, those had become pretty big programs that ASU could kind of model themselves after. And if USC and UCLA were to develop Division I programs, they maybe would kind of take the Arizona State route and model themselves after what Sun Devil hockey had done. I always thought that after ASU, the next 2 programs kind of on the West Coast that would come about would probably be schools like UNLV and Arizona, because they both have pretty good club teams. Obviously, SC and UCLA have club programs as well. I want to say the Kings, or not the Kings, the USC had used to play at the rinks, I think, the Ducks' old barn. Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think it'd be really big for the game. To be completely honest with you, I'm a little surprised that some programs haven't started to develop quicker, especially here in California. But it would definitely be interesting. I think that there's definitely an interest in it as well. When I was a senior at ASU, the Sun Devils and Harvard played at Great Park Ice, or where the Ducks practice now. It was right after the building opened. Yeah, we did those games, and it was awesome. I mean, it was just so cool. And then another thing that I thought was really interesting was, I want to say it was that same year, ASU basketball, they did this a few times in a row. They had played at like the NBA Hall of Fame games at Crypto. And one game, like there were 4 teams involved, like TCU was there, St. John's, USC. And when ASU was there, we saw like a lot of ASU hockey jerseys in the building too. And that always made me think, like, I wonder if ASU had come out to California, or if some of these California schools had started to get D1 hockey programs. I wonder what the interest would be. And I think it would be high. So I would love to see SC and UCLA kind of trend in that direction as well.
Real quick, I have to ask you, have you ever had any conversations or cross paths with a very famous ASU alum and a Kings fan in Al Michaels? I've always wanted to ask him. He's one of my dream interviews of this show. Probably Will Ferrell would be the other one, but I've always wanted to ask him about, I mean, he's got one of the greatest calls, obviously, in the history of sport with the Miracle on Ice. And he's never really done hockey, though. I mean, he's obviously football, baseball. I always wanted to ask him about his interest in it. Have you ever crossed paths with him at all?
I have, actually. Have you read his book by chance?
I have not.
So he has a book called You Can't Make This Stuff Up. The first chapter or two, or like the prelude to his book about his career and his life, is about his family being at Game 6 against the Devils in the Stanley Cup Final. So he's a huge Kings fan.
Yeah.
He was at the Skate for LA Strong game this year. And we got to interview him for that. And he's great. He's always got his Kings hat on. My first interaction with him actually was at a game. I was there with my fiance and a friend of ours who was also a broadcaster and an ASU alum. We just happened to walk past him on the concourse, and we were like, that was Al Michaels. Like, I knew that he had season tickets, and I knew that he came to games very often. I didn't know where they were. Like, I'd never seen him at a game before. And I was already working with the organization. I want to say this is my second or third year with the Reign. And then we end up going down to our seats. And at one point, we get up and kind of look back toward the aisle, and he's sitting right there. And we were like, oh, his seats must be right here. And then the next intermission, we go up to go to the bathroom, get food, whatever. And he's standing out there. And I was like, all right, we're just going to go say hello to Al. So we went up and we introduced ourselves, and he was great. And we talked with him for a few minutes about ASU and about the Reign and about the Kings. And he was great. And he's one of those people. I mean, like, you hear his voice and he's just so recognizable immediately. But yeah, I have had a few interactions with Al. He's a great guy. I'd love to have more in the future. But I know that when he comes out to the Kings game, that's all he wants to do is just sit down and watch the Kings. In fact, I want to say, driving into Game 1 this year against the Oilers, I was pulling into the lot at Crypto, and I was listening to 710. Our game was going to be on 710 in 3-4 hours or whatever. And they had brought Al on to help them preview the series. And he was like, I'm in the car right now. I'm going to downtown. I'm getting ready to go to Game 1. And he talked about Kopitar and Doughty and Kuzmenko and then McDavid and Draisaitl. It was very cool to kind of hear his thoughts going into the series.
That's very awesome. That's very cool that you could interact with him. We're just getting started here with Josh Schaefer, going to get his thoughts on what his role has been with the Kings, and also with the offseason and next season with the Kings as well. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets fast and easy. Prices actually drop the closer you get to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Gametime's zone deals picks the best seat for your section. Ever wonder what your view would actually be like before you buy? Well, the app shows you a panoramic view, so you know exactly what you're going to get. Gametime has prices that will not include any kind of hidden fees. If you're worried about what happens when plans change, Gametime has your back with a cancellation protection. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're continuing with Josh Schaefer. Josh, I mentioned your first year with the LA Kings, kind of wearing a lot of different hats in some respects. You're doing some hosting, you're doing some interviews, social media, and of course, play-by-play as well on the audio broadcast, and did some TV games as well. I think you're even filling in right now for Zach Dooley while he's on vacation. It seems like you're wearing a lot of different hats right now.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the vision when I was brought in after what was, I guess, my third full season with the Reign, fourth overall. And we kind of had a feeling that something might happen, especially with the 7-10 deal that the Kings had signed last summer. So the opportunity to get back on terrestrial radio was really big for the Kings, especially to get on a station like 710, where pretty much everybody else in town also has their games broadcast. So it was a really cool opportunity. And I think that the thought process coming in was that I would, for the games that were simulcast, which was the plan was to still have a few games simulcast from TV to radio, games that were not going to be on 710, but only on the ESPN LA app, which was a really cool development this last season as well. So the games that were simulcast and were app only on radio, I was going to do pre-games, intermissions, and then I'd host a show and I'd have a podcast and I'd do a lot of social media content for the team. And then every game that was on 710, it would be Daryl Evans and myself on terrestrial radio. And eventually that did change to us just doing every single game on radio, regardless of whether or not it was on 710 or just the ESPN LA app. So my role did kind of change halfway through the season. I still think I did wear quite a bit of hats, and have been doing that again this summer. Of course, Zach was on vacation, so was kind of running the back end of the LA Kings insider site, but which was fun. I had those opportunities when I was with the Reign to either fill in for the Kings on radio or TV, which I had done a few times, and then during rookie camp and training camp and development camp as well, there were opportunities to contribute to LA Kings Insider. So we kind of envisioned that was probably going to be a possibility for this past season as well, which was for a little bit. And then I went full-time on radio, so was doing less of that and obviously more of the broadcast content. But it was cool. It was a great learning experience for my first year in the NHL. The travel was different. It's what I've always wanted to do, was travel across the league and across the country with one team and kind of experience the league from that standpoint. But it is different from the American League, as you can probably imagine. The schedule is different. The way we travel is different. But it was a blast. It's just a really cool opportunity to kind of follow along and work with a bunch of people who I knew already. And then also get to kind of follow along with Nick Nixon and learn from him in his final season.
Well, as you mentioned, there is an opening for TV play-by-play broadcaster for the LA Kings. Have you been told what your role is going to be for next season?
Yeah, I'll be around with the organization. I know that there's still some things that are going to be, worked out over the next couple of months. But yeah, I'll be here. I'm excited to be with the Kings going forward, and we'll see how it shakes out. But we're kind of at that point of the summer, as I'm sure you can imagine, where we've had the draft and development camp, and now we're kind of in that lull before hockey really picks back up again. So I'm certainly itching to keep inching closer and closer to getting some hockey back. But by the time it does, we'll know what we're doing.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. And I thank you very much for helping me fill the time as
Yes.
we go into this. But the offseason for the Kings has certainly been very interesting. First and foremost, there's a new general manager in Ken Holland. I know you got a chance to do a sit-down interview with him shortly after he got the job. Your thoughts on the Kings' new GM?
He was pretty open with why he was brought in, and that was to maximize the opportunity that the Kings have to win now. It's not a the rebuild or whatever that term is well behind us at this point. And the Kings have been inching closer and closer to where they want to be these last few years. I completely agree with what he had said about the team that Rob Blake had built come the end of last season, where they were close to where they wanted to be, but things didn't work out in the end. And that was a pretty good, platform for Kenny to start building on for this upcoming season and for the future. But he was pretty open about it. I'm not here to usher in a rebuild. I'm not here to sell everything and start over. Like, this is a group that was built by somebody else. I'm coming in to put the finishing touches on it for these next couple of seasons and really maximize the opportunity that this group has. So his track record and his resume speaks for itself. Obviously, the 25 years or whatever it was he was with the Red Wings in total. He's got a lot of wins to show for it and some hardware to show for it as well. He did a lot of good things with the Oilers too, as Kings fans are certainly aware of, and just couldn't get him over the hump. But now it's a new opportunity for him, and I think you can kind of see the ways that he, operates as a GM, especially with what the Kings had done in free agency and the moves that he has kind of prioritized in the past when he was with Detroit and when he was with Edmonton. And now you can see with the Kings. And obviously, I think that he was open about this too. The Kings want to spend toward the cap. They want to be able to put themselves in a position to win now, to continue to upgrade when the upcoming trade deadline comes around later next season. And I do think that, given what his philosophies have been, or what I can gather that they've been, he's kind of pushing the Kings in that direction for next year and beyond.
Yeah, 5 veteran players brought in, probably to strengthen, the other areas of the team. No star players were brought in, but players to fill specific roles in areas the Kings felt that they needed those roles filled in. But there is that one move that everyone has been talking about, and that's Corey Perry. And he's been a guy that fans like me have loved to hate for so long. And I understand the role he's being asked to play, and I'm not even saying that the Kings didn't need someone to fill that role. But I think I'm sure you've heard a lot about it as well. And being a Southern California native and being around Ducks and Kings hockey, it's going to take some getting used to. To see Corey Perry in that uniform is going to be very weird for both Ducks and Kings fans here.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. He is obviously, like you mentioned, a player that I had seen quite a bit growing up in LA and watching hockey. He immediately makes the forward group better. I was very surprised when I had first heard the name thrown out there. And then obviously when it came across Twitter and when the little push notification came across, it was one of those things where it was like, wow, I cannot believe what I've just seen. But then when the dust settles a little bit and you think about it, and I think the same thing can be said for Joel Armia, him coming in as well. He and Corey Perry both played with Philip Deneau when they went to the Stanley Cup final in Montreal. Armia and Perry were line mates. Those two guys, especially Corey Perry, they make the Kings' bottom 6 better immediately. If Corey Perry slots immediately onto the Kings' power play, which I have no idea if that's going to happen. As for really, the Kings could roll out the same 5 forward power play unit that they did in the playoffs last year to start next season. I have no idea. If they don't do that, if they mix things up and try to go with 2 pretty stacked power play units, maybe Corey Perry's on the Kings power play to start. And maybe that makes the power play immediately better, because we saw the results that Edmonton did get in the playoffs, even after they played the Kings, of having Corey Perry on that top power play unit. He scored 10 goals in the playoffs for the Oilers. And that was after an impressive regular season as well at 39 years old. So I do think that he makes the Kings tougher to play against. He makes them bigger and stronger. As we saw in the playoffs, the fourth line ended up seeing their minutes kind of decrease as that series went along. Same thing with some players on the blue line. So I think that also speaks to the moves that the Kings made in free agency defensively as well. But primarily with Perry, I think that makes the Kings bigger and stronger at forward. It gives them a little bit more depth. And especially with the pieces that the Kings still have, I like what the Kings have done up front with their 12 plus forwards that they can move around here. And another way that I see it too is, as much as it's disappointing, like injuries happen. We saw it last year. Injuries happen. Like, there are guys with their current forward group that can kind of move up and down the lineup if injuries happen. So I really like the way that Corey Perry fits into the Kings lineup if you look at it on paper. But of course, we're still a couple of weeks, so we're about a month or so away from training camp, and then obviously after that from the regular season. So I'm very interested to see how things unfold with Corey Perry wearing an LA Kings jersey, which is a sentence I don't think I ever thought anyone would ever say.
Yeah, you're not alone in that, to be sure. A couple more questions with Josh Schaefer. Going to talk about some players that he saw with Ontario, now with the Kings as well. We'll do that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. All right, we are wrapping it up with Josh Schaefer, LA Kings broadcaster and host. And there's still some business to take care of for the LA Kings this offseason. They still need to re-sign restricted free agent forward Alex Laferriere. And then there's Adrian Kempe, who's a UFA after this season. I know they would like to get something done before the season starts. We're all hoping that can be the case. Adrian Kempe is obviously a very important player for the LA Kings, maybe one of the most underrated players in the NHL for my money. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Josh, but maybe if he played in some other markets, maybe he'd be a little bit more high profile, but just a great player for the LA Kings.
I think this last season maybe has kind of started to change that narrative a little bit. I completely agree with you of him being an underrated player in the NHL, but I do think that last year's playoff series against the Oilers, the Four Nations face-off with Sweden, I think that people have really started to pay attention to who Adrian Kempe is and the impact that he's had on the LA Kings. Because really, I mean, you look at the last 3-4 years for the LA Kings, their best player has been Adrian Kempe. And that, I think that means something when you've still got Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty in the ranks. Kevin Fiala's been terrific. Quentin Byfield has certainly impressed these last few years as well. So just the fact that Adrian Kempe, I think, has been the Kings' most impressive player these last few years, and this last season in particular, maybe that narrative is changing a little bit. Maybe there will be more attention surrounding him. And of course, like you mentioned, the Kings would love to get something done with him before the season begins. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities either. But that is certainly priority number one. And if not that, certainly close to it for the Kings.
Anze Kopitar going into his 20th season. If all things go as expected, he'll pass Marcel Dion, become the franchise's all-time leading scorer. I don't know if Kopi knows at this point. I know Ken Holland has said they're taking a wait-and-see approach, and after the season, they'll address what his future is. I've told Kings fans, just in case, I mean, I know we've always appreciated him, but it could be his final year. Hope it isn't, but what he's meant to this organization is clear. But just your thoughts on maybe the final season for Anze Kopitar.
Yeah, it might be. The impressive thing about him is that you look at his statistics throughout his career, and there's the years where it really spikes up, but he's just the model of consistency for an NHL player. I mean, he almost never gets hurt. He's almost always the team's leading scorer, or at least close to it. He's the franchise leader in almost every category. And he has just been that kind of model captain in the NHL, one of the most respected players in the league for not just how he plays the game, but for the results that he delivers as well. So when the time comes for him to retire, and then even beyond that for Drew Doughty to move on, things will certainly feel different. But those two guys have just continued to mean the world to this franchise and to this group. And Kopi's obviously at the forefront of that. In fact, what's interesting is at the end of the season, I think it was in Seattle at the end of the year. I want to say that was the first Kings game that has, like, since those guys broke into the league, that did not include either Dustin Brown, Jonathan Quick, Anze Kopitar, or Drew Doughty in the lineup. And that was the second to last game of the regular season. It was supposed to be the last, but there was that Calgary game that was rescheduled. That was the first game in like 20 years that did not feature at least one of those players because guys were getting the night off. And you didn't really think about it going in, but as the game was played, even on the air with Daryl, you kind of think like, it is weird that we have not said Doughty or Kopitar or any of those other guys their names tonight. So it'll be weird. When the time's right for him, he'll make that decision. And it's certainly something that I'm not necessarily looking forward to, but something that when the time comes will be certainly earned for Anze Kopitar.
Josh, final question for you. We mentioned Kopitar and Doughty. I know that the Kings and their fans hope that Quentin Byfield and Brandt Clark can be close to those two guys when their career's all said and done. They're just getting things started. You called their games with the Ontario Reign. You've now seen them join the LA Kings. Your thoughts on how important those two guys are for now and for the future for the LA Kings?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to be important, right? Clark is somebody that it seems like on the blue line, the organization is committed to building around. And to allowing him to continue to develop. Joel Edmondson was absolutely massive for Brandt Clark last season. The fact that those two got to play together for most of the year, I think was really important for his development as a player. There were obviously some games where Clarkie wasn't in the lineup and had to kind of work his way back in. But you saw, first of all, you saw the spurts where he showed off how talented he really is. But there was also a learning curve for him as well. I think he's one of the most offensively gifted young defensemen in the game right now. But what, for me, sets him aside from some of the other young defensemen in the NHL, like a guy like Hudson, is it's not a shot. It's not his passing ability. It's not the way that he skates or anything like that. It's just his vision. His offensive IQ is so high. And when you see it on display and it physically comes out on the ice, those are the moments that make you like lean back in your chair a little bit like, wow, I can't believe we just saw him do that. He's obviously got some things to learn and he's going to continue to develop, but I think he's a really important player for the Kings. And it was very evident that he was talented and that he had a bright future when we saw him with the Reign. And he was so good the first half of the season. And then similar to this last year with the Kings, there was a little bit of a learning curve around the holidays and around New Year's. And then the second half of the year, he needed to step up and be the top guy on the blue line for the Ontario Reign in that 23-24 season. And that's kind of how we saw things shift for him with the Kings this last year as well. And for Quentin Byfield, I mean, this is a player that should not have played in the American Hockey League in 2021. He should have either gone back to the OHL to play his final year there, or play in the NHL, which is a tough decision for a lot of teams. Some guys are ready and some guys aren't. And sometimes there's nothing to gain for a guy like Quentin Byfield to go back to juniors and just beat up on everybody. But then sometimes there's nothing for him to gain to put him in the NHL and then he gets beat up. So it was just a perfect fit for him that in any other year wouldn't have worked. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the OHL shutting down, he got to play with the Reign. He played against grown men. He played against other top prospects as well. And, going back and forth between the Reign and the Kings that first year or so, I think was massive for him. And we saw him take a big step in the 23-24 season and an even bigger one after his extension last offseason. This year, it was a slow start. It was, you saw things starting to go until he finally scored his first goal in Minnesota in early November. But it took, that's like 3 weeks for him to score his first goal of the season. And it was like, when is this going to come? And then finally, when it did, I mean, there was no slowing down. And obviously there was the 6-game goal streak or whatever it was at the end of the season. And just the tear that he was on in the second half. He was massive for the Kings. And I think that they're really excited about what they have in a potential future 1C when the time comes for Anze Kopitar to hang it up, like we mentioned a couple minutes ago. So two guys that they can certainly build around up front and on the blue line. And I would expect them both to take a massive step in the right direction this year as well.
Certainly hope so, and looking forward to seeing that. He is LA Kings broadcaster and host Josh Schaefer. You can follow him on X and Twitter at Josh Schaefer PXP for play-by-play. Josh, thanks for doing this. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your off season, and let's not wait 2 years to talk again.
Absolutely, Eddie. Thanks so much. Good luck the rest of the off season, and I'm sure we'll see you once training camp and the regular season comes around.
Absolutely. And looking forward to seeing you out there. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. For you everydayers, those of you who listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming about our next show, it is our weekly fan feedback show, your chance to ask questions or share your thoughts on anything involving the LA Kings. If you want to get an email in for that, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, and you can leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. Stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. And if you want some extra Kings coverage, send me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com. We'll get you the information on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.